or Reddit, what was the worst case for firing a worker? Not HR, but I remember watching HR and security cornering people from both ends of their desk rows during the GM salary layoffs in 2019. As people started realizing what was happening, a bunch of people started leaving before HR hit their area, only to get stopped and checked against lists by security at the exits. Most fucked up, though, was when they cornered the sweetest 68-year-old man in our department and listening to him weep about how he was only 2 wires from a pension. Edit. For those asking about the pension, I've got no fucking clue about those details, just that he was devastated about it. At GM, the only people that qualify for pensions are the old-timers with 30-plus years who were grandfathered in before. GM stopped offering it to new hires. So, I have no idea what legalese might be in their salary contracts that fucks them over if they don't stay X amount of years. Not HR, but I used to manage a company that provided round-the-clock Mason LPNs in patients' homes. One day, a cop shows up and informs me that we need to send another nurse to the patient's home because they arrested the one that was there. Turned out that she was running a brothel out of the patient's home, and apparently the patient's son was a client. I was a manager supporting another manager that was firing a guy for sexual harassment. Everything is lined up. Every process followed. None of this is a surprise to anyone attending. Appropriate support all around, strong employee protections in my country. Things have been calm and negotiated clearly the entire time. Final meeting, and the dude getting fired suddenly loses it, goes on a rant defending his behavior, which accidentally outs him doing worse behavior we didn't have on camera. Before anyone can say anything, he realizes he's fucked up, throws a punch at my head, and runs for the door. A news photographer for the television station I worked for had a habit of taking one of the news vans with our station logo prominently displayed to the local strip club. Not HR, but I had to terminate an assistant manager because he would walk by employees and fart. We warned him that it was harassment and to stop, but he kept doing it, so we terminated him. My first job was Subway, eventually worked up to being store manager. Owner called me one day asking why so many orders were edited. After I would leave for the day, a staff member was going in and editing my orders and rerunning them to collect the Subway points. We did not have HR, and obviously I wasn't there when these edits were happening. Had to let him go. Another was deleting orders and taking the cash from the till. Just because you can see them on the post anymore doesn't mean they aren't logged lol. Heard about a guy fired for emailing his resignation to the whole company as a joke, then refusing to leave his desk. He stole someone else's lunch from the fridge. Not HR, but a manager. The one that stands out to me was being forced to fire this sweet older lady who worked for us because she took 3 little chocolates on her way out after working a double. Normally, this wouldn't have even warranted a conversation to me. The company one missed those chocolates and she works hard, was a little sweet treat. The problem was one of her coworkers saw and ratted her out. That's a whole other story, but he was a young white kid and his sister was dating the HRBP. My hands were then forced because it was technically theft, on camera, witnessed and reported, and others had been fired for theft, so we had to maintain those standards. I've since changed jobs, and funnily I worked with the lady I had to fire again when she came in as a temp worker to an event, and I got to apologize to her and tell her how much I disagreed with the decision. He burned the garlic while trying to make a pasta sauce 4 times in a row while cooking with the chef, who came down from the office to check if the guy was really bad, like we all said to him. Only time in my life I saw someone fired on the spot, legal in the trial period. Not HR, but I was part of a group that had put in multiple complaints against a coworker who was constantly making mistakes in our account records and made people uncomfortable with how she spoke to people. She was also just generally not a great person, unhygienic, possibly stealing silverware from the communal kitchen, and I once watched her speed around an ambulance with its lights and sirens on to get to our office on time. It took months before she got fired, and when it finally happened, she threw a fit and faked a heart attack in the middle of the hallway, shouting at the top of her lungs. She was genuinely insane. Not HR, but a guy walked up to the site manager and asked for a raise while the manager was showing higher-ups potential clients around the warehouse. He was let go shortly afterwards. I ran into him working at Salvation Army, claiming that he got fired because he's black. A salesperson threw the prospective buyer's keys on the roof of the building to prevent them from leaving. He was still insisting it was to make a point about the quality of the item for sale. He had 20 years at the company. It was wild. Our manager here, I haven't really had any bad ones. They are usually pretty simple since most terminations are for obvious reasons, which are hard to refute or argue with. And I'd like to think I do a good job of gathering relevant evidence. One that does stand out to me was a termination for a mouse jiggler he was using to make it look like he was working on remote days, which we discovered. After his manager came to us saying he wasn't producing any work when he wasn't in the office, I brought him in and basically said, "We know you were using mouse jiggler." And he immediately said something like, No, I would never do that. That's not me. Yada yada. So I bring out the screenshots of him sitting on the same screen for hours a day, multiple remote days in a row. After that, he finally just says, okay, that's fair enough. Was a pretty quick about face from no, I would never do that, to you got me. 18-year-old student intern walked by one of the attractive girls in my group, smacked her on the ass, and then asked her if she got fucked over the weekend. Was called to talk to a guy who threatened to beat up his coworker. When asked why, he said this guy talks so much shit all day long, who wouldn't want to punch him in his stupid face. He was so done with that guy. He didn't give a shit about his employment and raged about all the violence he wanted his coworker to experience by him. So we had to accompany him out of the building. They did the whole check your email at the end of the day Thursday. If you get this email, you have a Teams meeting scheduled. Don't worry about coming into work on Friday thing. They forgot to email some people who they were letting go and their badges deactivated, so they came into work the next day very upset and confused. They also let a guy go ostensibly for performance issues, but everyone is pretty sure it's because his dad was an executive who messed up and got let go, and keeping him around was awkward. A guy took his work van to the pub, managed to get it stuck on a bollard whilst driving out several hours later. An older guy in the car park asked what was going on, and the driver told him to f off. The older guy happened to be a local counselor. Probably the employee who was so good at covering their mistakes that nobody realized how bad things were until HR finally had to step in. I had a black veteran sexually harassing a Hispanic gay employee. I think I got together and agreed to check all the boxes. Another not HR story. Out of college, I worked for a mail fulfillment company. There was this young, pretty woman who worked there who was always dressed like she was going clubbing. She must have misunderstood the industry because she was fired from mail fulfillment. She was getting paid to blow guys during her lunch break. When the head of IT security is arrested at work and walked out in front of the entire office in handcuffs, you don't even want to know what dude was up to. I worked at a major telecom. One of the dudes was selling international calls out of the office. Someone would call him and he would forward the call to wherever in the world with no time limits. This was back in the late 90s, so international long distance was expensive. After he was fired, his manager was cleaning out his desk and found a box of condoms, both used and not used. He was jerking and setting at his desk. They destroyed everything in his office because of that fine. I had to fire a sales executive because a flight attendant caught him jerking off in the owner's private jet lol. I was working for a big tech company, let's call it HAL, doing IT support at night for hospitals. When I was still pretty new, one of the guys who trained me just went there one day. I found out later that they tried to promote him to FTE, but when they did his background check, he has a criminal record, something minor, I think, because the staffing agency hadn't checked when they hired him. He had no idea he was about to go from finally getting benefits and salary directly to fired. Anytime someone got fired at that place, they'd just disappear, save the management wouldn't say why. I used to joke that since guys in suits would put a black bag over your head and wheel your office chair out of there. Anyway, yeah, you two been a great employee. A couple of years, but we just found out we never should have hired you. Ranks high for me. Not HR, but a company I worked at had to fire a guy because he kept peeing on the keyboard of someone he didn't like. It took months to find out.